In this lesson, we will cover two of the goals identified for our course project: displaying all the airports on the map and creating a styled info window with each airport's unique data. Before we get started, let's clean up the code from the previous lesson, lesson 6.3. So the first thing we want to do is let's remove this event trigger, because we're not going to need that for the project. And then let's scroll down to the marker options in the add marker function. And we're just going to keep the title, so we'll remove these other properties. Now we have the base code that we'll use for the remainder of this lesson and will serve as the foundation for our course project. The first project goal was to display all the airports on the map. So the first thing we need to do is include the airport object in our HTML. So let's jump to our HTML file and go ahead and add the airport data file that we created. Next, let's jump to our scripts.js file. And in our load map function, we want to create a for loop to go through each of the airports in the array and add them to the map. So right now in our load map, we just create a single marker and associated info window. So what we want to do is wrap this in a for loop. So start at 0, and our airport data is saved to this variable, so we can just get the length and increment by 1 each time. Now the marker creation info window will be created for each of these. Within this for loop, let's create a local variable called airport. And it will just contain the data in the array at the index of the for loop. When we create this marker, we're going to modify the add marker function to pass in this airport data. So within the marker creation, we'll pass in the airport data. Then we will add the individual airport data as an argument to our add marker function. Now we can update the latitude, longitude, and title to reflect the airport data. So I can define airport.lat and airport.long. And then we'll replace the static title with the airport city, state, and code, which is defined as airport. Now if I save that code and refresh, you can see that all the markers now show up on the map. But if I click on them, the info window is still the static content we created before. So let's go in and update the info window content. If you scroll down to the add info window, we need to be able to access the parameters of the airport data so that we can update the contents here in the info window. To do that, we're going to go back up to our load map function. And here, when we create the new marker, we're going to bind the airport data to it. So we'll take the new marker, we'll create a parameter called airport, and then bind the data to it. This is useful so that you can bind data to the marker itself, object itself, and you don't have to create other variables to store this data. Before we update the HTML content of the info window, we need to calculate the average percentage of arrival and departures, the total flights, and set the icon color and default size. We will add these calculations as properties to the airport object variable. So after we create this airport variable here, I'm going to go ahead and cut and paste these calculations in, and then we can talk about them. So the first parameter is the average percentage, total per, and that just adds the arrival percentage, departure percentage, and divides by 2 to get an average percentage of overall on-time arrival and departures. And then we're going to calculate the total flights by just adding the arrivals and departure operations. We'll set the default icon color to green, and then we're going to set the icon size to 32 by 32. Now we can start updating the static values in the HTML info window content to reflect each individual airport's data. The first thing we're going to do is add a local variable that points to the airport properties we bound to the marker object. This is just to make the code cleaner to read as we start integrating this content with the HTML. So I'll call this variable details. I'll assign it marker.airport. I'm going to cut and paste some code that I've already updated, and then we can discuss what changes were made. Now you can see what we've done is we've updated these properties from the airport. So we specified the icon name, the total percentage here, the airport details, the city state, the airport code, and here we have the percentages. This is the arrival percentage and the operations, departure percentage and operations, and then finally the Latin long. So now when you click on these airports, you're going to get the individual code for each one. Now you can see there's some problems with this code. So let's come in here and add some functions to go ahead and clean it up. The first thing we want to do is round off the total percentage to 1 decimal place. So we're going to use math round and then multiply it by 10 and divide that value by 10. So now we'll only see a single decimal place. So let's just widen up the screen a little bit so we can see all the content here. When I click on a location, you can see it says Denver, Colorado, but then it still has the airport code here. So let's clean that up and remove it. I could have done this in the data, but we'll just do it after the fact. So the first thing we want to do is take the airport data and split it based on the parentheses. So we'll find the first parentheses, and then we want to take, that's going to give us an array, and then we want the first element in that array, right? So it'll give us Denver CO, and then the second part will be in an array, the second element 1 in the array. And now we want to limit the number of characters that can be displayed. Otherwise this will wrap, and so we'll just drop off characters. So we'll do substring, and we'll allow 19 characters. And now you can see it got rid of the airport code. The final thing I'd like to do is add some commas in here. So we have 18,000, 206. Just makes it a little bit more readable. So if we scroll down, we'll add a function called number with commas, and it'll just go through and add the comma for us. So we want to show that on the total operations for both arrival and departure. So we'll wrap those values in the function. So it'll add the commas. So now you can see it's added the commas, and this looks a lot better. It's cleaned up a lot. As I click on these markers, you'll notice that multiple info windows get created on every marker. And they overlap, and the user has to go back and close it. It's just not very clean. What I'd really like to do is have one info window that moves and closes as I click around on the individual markers. You can see from the code right now I'm creating a new info window inside our add info window function each time. And so what we need to do is let's move this out to a global variable. So we only have one info window object. So first we'll go ahead and just remove the creation of this info window. So we'll delete that. Let's go ahead and scroll up to the top and add our info window as a global variable. Instead of passing the parameters such as the content that we want to the info window, I'm going to add those dynamically when the marker is clicked. I'll set the content to be specific to that particular marker. And that way only a single info window will open up as you click on the different markers, and the content itself will just be updated. So let's update the content dynamically inside our event listener. First, we want to close any info windows that are already open. And we'll just call close the close method. And now we want to set the content of the info window. And so we'll use the set content method. And we'll pass in our content string from above. And we'll keep the open method the same. So now as I click around, you'll see that the content inside the info window will be updated, and there's only a single info window now appearing, since each time you open a new one, it closes the previous ones. So our map is starting to take shape. Right now we have all the airports placed on the map, and the contents of the info windows are populated. In the next lesson, we'll address the final two goals of the project, which is to easily identify the best and the worst airports and visualize the size of the airports based on total flight volume.